Chapter 18. Charlie at Last. She hardly knew him. He was not so much taller, but bigger somehow. Foreign. He wore homespun, but it was well tailored to his body. His brown hair was combed neatly against his head, and a carpet bag hung from his right hand. "Sister," he said quietly, and the voice was one she had never heard before and would not have known for his. "Sister," he repeated, his voice cracking on the words. "It's me, Charles." "Yes," she said. "Charles, so you come." He smiled then. She looked in vain for the funny, serious little boy she knew. He wasn't 13 yet. How could he have discarded that little child so quickly? He glanced around the crowded room. All the staring faces quickly dived back into their sewing, or knitting, or conversation. "I took the railroad car," he said in quiet pride. "The stage into New Hampshire, to Concord, and then all the rest of the way by train." Then he grinned like a child, but not the child she remembered. Not quite. She didn't know what to say. She cared nothing for railroads, those dangerous, dirty things. It was the farm she ached to know about. "Well," she said at last, "you must be tired, eh?" She cast about the parlor for 2 free chairs. At her glance, 3 girls rose and abandoned theirs in the far corner of the room beyond the dining tables. She thanked them and led him over. It was she who felt the need to sit. "Well," she said, arranging her apron on her lap. "Well, then?" It was as much of a question as she could manage. "I got good news, Lyddie," he said, a little of the boy she knew creeping into his voice. Her heart rose. "The Finneys have taken me on as a full apprentice." "Eh?" "More than that, truly. They treat me like their own. They don't have no child but me." "You got a family," she said faintly. "You'll always be my sister, Lyddie. I don't forget that. It's just—" He put the carpet bag on the floor and laid his cap carefully on top. His hands were big now, too large for his body. Finally, he looked up at her. "It's just, I don't have to worry every morning when I get up and every night when I lie abed. I just do my work, and every day, 3 times, the food is there. When the work is slack, I go to school. It's a good life they give me, Lyddie." She wanted to scream out at him, remind him how hard she had worked for him, how hard she had tried. But she only said softly, "I wanted to do for you, Charlie. I tried." "Oh, Lyddie, I know," he said, leaning toward her. "I know. But it weren't fair to you. You only a girl, trying to be father and mother and sister to us all. It were too much. This'll be best for you too, eh? Don't you see?" "No," she wanted to howl. "No. What will be the use of me then?" But she kept her lips pressed together against such a cry. And at last she said, "There's Rachel." He smiled again, his grown-up smile that turned him into a stranger. "I have good news there, too. Mrs. Finney asked me to bring Rachel back. She craves a daughter as well. And she'll be so good to her, you'll see. She even sent a dress. She made it herself for Rachel to wear on the train, with a bonnet even." His eyes went to the carpet bag beside the chair. "She's never had a proper ma, Rachel." "She has me. Oh, Charlie, I ain't perfect, but I do my best. Can't you see? I done my best for you. She's all I got left now. How can I let her go?" But even as she stormed within herself, she knew she had no choice. Like the rusty blade through her heart, she felt it. If she stays here with me, she will die. If I cling to her, I will be her death. She heard her own voice, calm as morning after a storm. No, quiet as death, say, When will you be leaving? The train leaves Lowell at 5 minutes after 7 of the morning. I'll come to fetch her at 6:30. I'll have her ready before I go to work. She stood. There was nothing more to be said. He stood too, cap in hand, wanting, she knew, to say more, but not knowing quite how. She waited. About the farm, he began. The farm. A few minutes before she had thought it was all she cared about. Now it had ceased to matter. Uncle Judah's bound and determined to sell. Lyddie nodded. Well, she said, so be it. He grinned wryly. For a man who says the Lord is set to end the whole creation at any minute, he's got a powerful concern for the vain things of this world. She realized he was trying to be funny, so she attempted a smile. But I near forgot. He reached into an inside pocket and took out a sealed letter. Lyddie stared at it. He ain't sending me money. Who? Uncle. Oh, no, not him. He says anything from the sale is rightly his for taking care of Ma and the babies all this time. No, this here is a letter. He handed it to her, studying her face the while. From Luke. Luke who? Lyddie, our friend Luke. Our neighbor, Luke Stevens. She seemed shocked. He couldn't know she was 2 lifetimes away from the day Luke had driven them to the village, and at least 1 lifetime from the day the Quaker boy had stood on the doorstep of number 5 in his peculiar disguise. She tucked the letter in her apron pocket. Thank you, she said, and goodbye, I reckon. I'll not be here in the morning when you come. It'll be all right, Lyddie. It'll be best for us all, eh? His voice was anxious. It'll work out best for you as well. You forgot your bag, she said. No, that's for Rachel. He picked it up and handed it to her. He put out his hands as if to shake hers, but hers were tightly wrapped around the handle of the bag. She nodded She nodded instead. The next she saw him, he would be taller than she, Lyddie thought. If there was a next time. She led him to the door. Goodbye. She mouthed the words. She couldn't have spoken them aloud if she'd dared. She climbed the stairs like an old, decrepit woman, clinging to the banister and pulling herself up step by step. Rachel was fast asleep. She would not wake her. In the candlelight she studied the lovely little face. Too thin, too pale, the skin nearly transparent. Lyddie brushed back a curl that had escaped its plate and smoothed it against Rachel's cheek. Any minute she would start to cough, her little body racked, the bed shaking. Mrs. Finney would keep her safe. She could go to school. She would have a good life, a real mother. And she will forget me, plain, rough, miserly Lyddie who only bought her ribbons because she was shamed to it. Will she ever know how much I loved her? How I would have gladly laid down my life and died for her? How, oh Lord, I am dying this very minute for her? She took out the dress. It was a lovely sprigged muslin. It looked too big for Rachel's tiny frame, but the child would grow into it. She would lengthen and fatten and turn once again into a stranger. Lyddie's tears were soaking the dress. She wiped her face on her own apron skirt, then laid out the new garments. The frilly little bonnet with ribbons and lace. A petticoat fit for a wedding. A length of pink ribbon was woven in and out all around the top of the hem, waisted, pure waist where no one would ever see it, except Rachel. She packed the bag. It took less than a minute. Rachel had so little. She remembered the primer, and then decided to keep it. Rachel would have a new one, a better one now. She took the book of verses off the nightstand and shut it in the bag, then took it out again. She got her box of writing materials, dipped her pen in the ink, and wrote in painful, careful script on the flyleaf, "For Rachel Worthen, from her sister Lydia Worthen, June 24th, 1846." Wiping her face carefully on her apron as she wrote, so as not to blot the page. She lay awake most of the night listening to Rachel cough, the sound rasping and sawing through her own body. But the pain of it was her salvation. She knew if she had ever doubted before, she was absolutely certain that Rachel must leave Lowell. When the first bell rang, instead of waking Rachel as usual, she waited until she herself was dressed and ready to go. Then she shook her gently. Rachel awoke at once, alarmed. "I'm late. Why did you let me sleep?" "You got a treat today, Rachie. Charlie's come to fetch you." "Charlie? My brother Charlie?" She was excited, as if she could really remember him. Lyddie brushed away a cobweb of envy. "He's come to take you for a visit." "He wants me to visit him?" She was plainly thrilled, but then she caught something in Lyddie's face. "You coming too, ain't you, Lyddie?" "No, not me. I gotta work, eh?" The child's face darkened. "I'll come later." She stretched out her hand. "Here, up you go. You gotta get ready." Rachel took Lyddie's hand and pulled herself upright, then threw back the covers. The child always slept under a quilt, even in the terrible summer heat. "How long will I be gone, Lyddie?" "I don't rightly know." Me and Charlie, we both think you should stay a while. Make sure you get rid of that silly cough, eh? The factory's too hot in the summer anyways. Lots of the girls take off come July." "Will you take off, Lyddie?" She was standing in her little night shift, scratching one leg with the bare toes of the other. "I just might. Who knows, eh?" Lyddie wrung out the cloth over the basin and handed it to Rachel to wash. "Come with me now, Lyddie." "Over on the other bed is a new dress for you to put on. You gotta dress fancy for riding on a train." "A railroad train?" "Luckiest girl I know. New dress and bonnet, train ride, holiday with a handsome man." She took the cloth from Rachel's hand, tipped up the child's chin, and began to wash her upturned face. "Now you learn your letters better so you can write me all about that train ride." The bell began to ring. She turned swiftly, wringing the cloth out over the basin, her face to the wall, lest she betray herself. "He'll be here to fetch you in an hour or so," she said brightly. "So get yourself dressed and go down and ask Mrs. Bedloe to give you an extra big breakfast." She turned only long enough to give Rachel a light kiss on the cheek, and then hurried out the door. "Come soon, Lyddie." Rachel's voice followed her down the stairs. "I'll miss you." "Be a good girl for Charlie," she called back, and rushed on down the stairs with a great clatter to erase any more sounds, any more doubts. Rachel had been gone nearly a week when she found the letter with her name written on it in small, neat handwriting. She had stuffed it into her trunk some days before, and couldn't remember at first where it had come from. She unsealed it curiously. "Dear Lyddie Worthen, doubtless thy Charlie has told thee about thy farm. Although our father pled on thy behalf, thy uncle could not be moved. Thus our father put down the purchase price himself, as he has 4 sons and not enough land for us all. I have spoken with thy Charlie. He has urged me to put aside my fears and speak my heart plain, which is that I long to earn from our father the deed to thy farm. Yet thy land would be barren without thee. May I dare ask thee to return, not as a sister, but as wife? Forgive these bold words, but I know not how to fashion pretty phrases fit for such as thee. In all respect, thy friend, Luke Stevens." What had Charlie said to the man to make him dare write such a letter? Do they think they can buy me? Do they think I will sell myself for that land? That land I have no one to take to any more? I have nothing left but me, Lyddie Worthen. Do they think I will sell her? I will not be a slave, nor will I be his freight, some homeless fugitive that Luke Stevens must bend down his lofty Quaker soul to rescue. She tore the letter into tiny bits and stuffed every shred of it into Mrs. Bedloe's iron cook stove, and then, to her own amazement, burst into tears.